We'll get started. I think everybody's here that we're expecting. I think what we'll do is I'll frame up the discussion, then we'll do a round of introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to John Paulson, our environmental specialist, to work through the agenda that we have laying on the table. Does everybody have that agenda that wants one? First of all, I don't know everybody in the room. My name is Kent Exner, City of Hutchinson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Obviously, what we're here today is to talk a little bit about the South Fork of the Crow River, the surrounding drainage basin, and in all actuality, all of the Crow River drainage basin, what that means to the South Fork, and then more specifically, the South Forks Basin, and looking at the potential of a watershed district and what that may or may not mean to the city, to the county, potentially to other counties that are within that watershed district. Obviously, the Crow River is a valuable community asset to the city of Hutchinson. There's cultural, recreational, industrial, aesthetic, public infrastructure, benefits and opportunities. I probably missed some in that list, but it is definitely a valuable asset to the city. And to a large degree, it's why the city exists where it's at today, if you go back in time. Knowing that, there's really been a desire, a need, I think, established to protect the Crow River and the adjacent basins, Otter Lake and Campbell Lake, within the Hutchinson area here. And how do we do that, I think, is now becoming the question, because the city in the recent past has made a continual, I think, reinvestment, improvement of the area around the river and the lakes. There's an extensive park and trail system that really, the river corridor, acts as the backbone of that system within the city. There's, obviously there's been substantial investments. A lot of them have been in conjunction with the DNR, Gary's office, and Mr. Collette has been a vital participant in a lot of the improvements in the recent past. We have the dam, the replacement of the dam, about 5 years ago now, where it was used to be an overflow structure. Now it's a rock spillway. We also improved the hydraulics of the downstream channel just east of the dam, doing a series of rock riffles to improve the flow dynamics. Some of the other efforts that have taken place in the not so distant past, there's been a riverbank restoration and rechannelization down on the south end of town near the Armory dump site. There's been numerous areas of riverbank stabilization, primarily through armoring the banks with riprap, with rock. Also, we've put in, I guess you'd call them flow hooks. I forget the exact terminology. Gary's probably more familiar with it, but basically, yep. Basically, it's a rock hook. It's to improve the flow dynamics of the channel and to protect a bank from erosion. So those have been implemented in the past with the help of the DNR. If you look back to the late 90s, early 2000, there was a private property buyout of properties within the floodplain and the floodway. A lot of those properties no longer exist. And also just want to touch upon shoreland ordinance administration. The city's been fairly active in implementing and administering the shoreland ordinance that's passed down by the state. Wastewater treatment effluent permit. About 2 years ago, the city had to start the process of, in essence, renegotiating our effluent permit with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and what was arrived at in the end really protects the water quality of the Crow River. Basically the standards that are placed on the city with respect to our wastewater effluent. We actually now, with the help of the DNR, through a flow metering station, monitor the flow, and when the flow gets down to a certain level, we have to tighten up our treatment processes to basically improve the effluent out of the wastewater plant due to the lack of, the lack of flow that exists to dilute the effluent coming from the wastewater treatment plant. And then just, I don't have to tell a lot of you in the room, but you know, the city's been very active in ponding, you know, both with respect to city projects and private development projects going back to the early 90s when those initial efforts really started within the state of Minnesota. And to this day, we're looking to improve upon our stormwater collection and treatment system through the addition of more regional ponding and identifying those opportunities and implementing those. Looking forward with respect to the river corridor and the lake basins, some things that the city is putting time and effort into. Obviously additional regional stormwater ponds, treatments, rate control. We've drafted an agreement and actually executed an agreement to replace the South Grade Road Bridge, which is on the south side of Otter Lake, basically bisects Otter Lake. Replace that bridge, improve the width and the clearance, the height of that channel beneath the bridge in conjunction with McLeod County. We're looking at the Highway 7 box culvert just west of town beneath Highway 7. Basically, that's the connection between the river basin and Campbell Lake to the north. And looking forward, other things, loose line trail improvements, really outside of city limits, trying to bring more people to town to enjoy the trail and the park system immediately adjacent to the river basin. And parks and trails plan is currently being updated. Downtown plan, which obviously downtown is immediately adjacent to the river corridor, so that is going to be initiated, and that planning process is going to involve looking at the river and how downtown plays off of the river corridor. So with that, that's a little bit of history, looking back, looking forward. Obviously today, I think as it's noted on your agenda, we really want to examine what is a watershed district. You know, I think a lot of people probably in the room aren't that familiar with the concept, what that means, you know, to the city, to the counties that would be involved potentially, and then how do we go about implementing that, or what are the next steps. So with that, go ahead, Steve.
Mayor Steve Cook, and just welcome everybody here. I also did invite Robert Hunke, who's on the end here, and he's very interested in forming a lake association, if you will, and working with the city to do that and help initiate improvements with that. So I asked Robert to come today too to kind of talk, how does that fit into this process as well, and what funding options might there be also for a lake association of that kind, opportunities to work together. So I just wanted to mention that, get that out there too. So.
Definitely. With that, why don't we just do a quick round of introductions. Mayor Cook just introduced himself. I don't know if we want to then go to Bill. We'll just work around the table.
I'm Bill Arndt, city council member. Also, I'm the only one here that's lived all my life on the Crow River. I grew up, swam it, fished in it, drank it, accidentally, of course. But been very interested in trying to keep it good quality. Belong to the Crow, which is the group out of Buffalo, trying to do something with the Crow River. We improved canoe landings. I've got a canoe landing on my farm. It's been an interesting project.
Travis Johnson, Board of Water and Soil Resources out of St. Paul. Do a lot with hearings, appeals, Wetland Conservation Act Also, watershed district law, enlargements, establishments, and so on and so forth, so.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Jeff Nielsen. I also work for the Board of Water and Soil Resources out of New Ulm. And I work mainly with local units of government, soil and water district, counties, and watershed districts.
Robert Hunke. I have no time.
Gary?
Gary Bennett, I'm the area hydrologist right here in Hutchinson. My work area, for the most part, includes all of the South Fork Crow River, except for, I guess, those portions downstream of Lester Prairie, and start to get into the Twin Cities area, Carver. I'm hands off on that.
Roger Berger with McLeod County Environmental Services.
I'm Tom Fisher. I work with Board of Water and Soil Resources out of New Ulm as well. You're in my work area, McLeod County, Meeker County, Candy, Renville, Sibley, Nicollet, Seward. That's my work area.
My name's Dan, I work for the Crow River, I work with Bill quite a bit, and I basically sample lakes and streams, work with watershed districts, work with associations, kinda do whatever the boss says to do, whether it's sample a lake, work with a farmer, work with John with the city of Hutchinson stuff. Been there about 5 years now, it's been great, and I also don't drink the water out of the Crow as well, so.
Dolph Moan, Director of Parks, Recreation, Community Ed.
Chad Janowski, Hutch City Council. John Paulson, City Environmental. Someday we'd like to be able to drink the water of that river. It might not be in our lifetime. I appreciate everyone coming, the interest and support for just to be here to have this discussion as the big launching point. It will be interesting to see where this all goes. So.
Dan Jokum, City of Hutchinson Planning Director.
Jeremy Carter, City Administrator. My name is Mark Sidorano, City Attorney for Hutchinson.
Mary Christensen, City Council, Hutchinson.
Kermit Lynn, McLeod County Commissioner. And if I could relate to Bill, I was born and raised on the Crow, Philadelphia for 21 years. And enjoyed it a lot when I was a young kid too. My mother always kind of called me Huckleberry Finn out there. It'd be nice to see it come back to what it was before. So.
All right, thanks again, everybody, for joining us this afternoon.
I'll give you a little watershed overview. The map that was handed out, thanks to Bowser for providing that. I'll even show you a little bit bigger zoomed out look at that as well. Where we lie with the South Fork of the Crow. On the map you'll see that's broken up into two larger watersheds. Those are called H-digit hucks. The South Fork is obviously on the south end, and the North Fork. In the North Fork, the western third has two established watershed districts and already. North Fork of the Crow, or the North Fork Crow Watershed District and the Middle Fork Crow Watershed District. In the South Fork, we have a little bit of everything. We have watershed management organizations, Buffalo Creek Watershed District directly to our south in Hutchinson here. Cuts off about the lower third of the South Fork Crow 8-digit huck. The question that really came to the surface here recently, it's something we've talked about. What can we do? What are the options, possibilities for trying to improve the watershed as a whole? The watershed district concept's not nothing new. A lot of the original concept came from drainage, and farmers wanted to get rid of their water, and that was a method to do so. It's morphed into a much more than that. Obviously, water's become much more important to everyone around it, in it, by it, and that rely on it. In the metro, a lot of it's more water quality based, infiltration standards, those types of things. Of course, they're more focused on urban runoff. Out in outstate Minnesota, a lot of it still is really driven by drainage problems that arise within the watershed. Some of it they'll do many of the things that we've done within Hutchinson ourselves. Is they'll do stream bank restorations, those types of improvements, trying to reduce cutting along the bank. A watershed district is a method and a means to accomplish some of those goals that we're looking forward to with the city, what we're trying to achieve looking long term, and then also too is to expand that with outside the city boundaries. The problems we face within Hutchinson, we're very limited as far as the amount of good that we can do as to the watershed as a whole. The reason why is because we're on a fixed boundary. Watersheds don't care where county lines are or city boundaries are. And that's a problem that we continue to be running into, is that we can't extend past that. We can't make improvements beyond our own boundaries. We can work with partners, the Crow, watershed organizations. We can have partnerships and work and do projects together. But we're still limited, as the city's concerned, with what we can do internally. And what we'd like to see is something built out bigger beyond our boundaries. And a watershed district can accomplish that. And there's a couple different things that occur. The Crow, when the Crow was established, the Crow was actually a joint powers board. The original concept, I believe, was a watershed district, but then it ended up being pulled back to a joint powers agreement because of the fact they didn't want taxing authority, they didn't want ordinances and legal authority at that point in time. I think it's been 10 years ago, if I'm correct, Dan, that the Crow was established. And things have evolved enough, just even in those last 10 years, how we've seen things change, how our priorities have changed and shifted, that it's worth having that conversation again. Granted, we'll only be focusing on the South Fork rather than the entire watershed as a whole. But just in that time, you know, watershed districts have popped up, and you know, they're doing great things in the North Fork Basin with those watershed districts. Buffalo Creek's doing some projects as well. What it provides us another tool to implement improvements, to improve the water quality, improve the watershed as a whole, and the practices that occur within the watershed. And that's what we're really trying to accomplish. Crow has funding, city has funding, counties have funding, some limited, some more, some others, depending on what you can use it for. It's real widespread across the board. And then one of the pieces that you can also accomplish that is to try to streamline some of that. You can really focus your efforts where the improvements need to be done. And that's another thing that this can accomplish too. So pulling everyone together with the partners that we have, the Crow, the South Fork Crow, the group we worked with, watershed districts we've met with on the Middle Fork, North Fork, dealt with those people, Buffalo Creek, then the South Fork Crow TMDL. As that started to develop, we started to build those partnerships. And by doing so, we start to build that foundation to really take that next step forward with potentially developing a watershed district. Of course, as I said, watershed boundaries don't care where your county lines are. But in essence, what we need to do is eventually, if this does evolve, we'll have to step over those county lines. And what we're here for today is talk about local interest, local support at the city, at the county level, and if it's there, let's foster that discussion to potentially start to build that out into those other counties, if that's exactly what we intend to do. So I'll ask Dan from the Crow too. The funding that's available, it's limited. I mean, they start to run into problems with, they're not a watershed district, and there's limitations with that. They don't have a water plan of their own because they can't do it. They don't have the legal authority to establish something like that. So they're limited on the funding for them to implement projects throughout the entire watershed. And the watershed district concept, that's one of those opportunities that arise through that process. And like I said, the Crow can attest to that. That's something that they've been faced with. That's something they're challenged with. They function strictly off of grants, and they don't have a tax base or a taxing authority with a fixed steady revenue source that's coming in to support that type of an organization. So that's kind of the watershed overview. The people sitting here today, it's pretty diverse. It's city, county, it's county staff officials, city staff, DNR, Bowser, public citizens or private citizens. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Is the only way you can really make improvements is if you look at everything holistically and everyone works together. That's the only way we're going to be able to make any type of visual change where you can eventually it's not something that happens overnight, but over time you can make enough improvements where it actually makes a difference. Need for watershed district. I'll take a step into the next agenda item. Improve water quality. Water plan development is another component of that. Stable funding source for watershed projects, as I also touched on. I mean, these are all critical components of why you would want to do something like this, and they're all reasons on why we're sitting here having this discussion. The only way you can really make an impact is if you look at everything upstream and look at everything holistically, and apply those sources of funding and those types of projects and implement them where they actually do the most good. Within the watershed district discussion, it comes back to why are we even here? I mean, where does this concept come from? I'll kick this over to Steve and kind of the thought process with the end statements looking forward into the future. You know, where do we start to foster these ideas, and how do we make them grow? How do we fertilize them to get them to sprout into something bigger? So.
I guess it really has started just with discussions in the community, as well as officials and staff, and recognizing, as stated earlier, that the river really is an asset, not just for the city, but for the whole region. But we are seeing issues with the river, with the silting that's happening. And realize that it is a long-term effort to make changes, but we have to start somewhere. And we don't wanna wait any longer. Start working together and developing a plan, and trying to get partners in line to try to do that. So this is the first step, part of that, so I appreciate that again.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I'll bring one thing up, or not one thing, but I think today we're gonna start at the level table. I've been a farmer, and I live on the river, like I said before. I think one of the biggest problems is we cannot sit down and work out a program. I mean, I go up and down the river, there's crops planted directly on the edge of the river, there's crops planted on the edge of our drainage ditches. We all use it as a drainage system. I think there's 480 square miles on the Crow River going up to Wilmer. It's used as a major drainage system. If in some way we could start with backing off of that river, instead of a lot of rules and get the people that wanna volunteer, first of all, that wanna volunteer their farms or their land to create a buffer along the river. I think this is number one. I've seen the river change over the years so much, it's unbelievable. There's oak trees that are 200 years old are now in the river. I mean, the silt bed has changed. And we gotta work with that river basin, but try to stop it from spreading westwise. We need the overflow area, that I'd grant. But if we could, instead of lots of red tape and paperwork and many trips to Glanco, to try to talk to people on a level playing field. Gee, you got this land, are you willing to take X number of dollars for so many years to just leave it alone? Instead of, oh, you gotta have it in crop for so many years before you can get into any program. I went through this. I had a piece of land that I had filled 6-foot scour holes years ago. And I wanted to get it in permanent set aside, or not permanent only, but 10-year, 15-year program. Oh, you gotta crop it for so many years. These are things that irritate the people that are running the land. And like, there's time, I got parcels of land, even if I wouldn't have to pay taxes on it, I'd be happy to leave it where it is. You know, and these are things that I think we have to sit down, level table today, and start working from there. All branches, I mean, from the hydrologist to the Crow, to the city, to the state. And I think things can work out that way, but if everybody fights each other all the time, which all I did is mention this here, Crow River's going into a watershed in Renville County. You got a war. I mean, it's gonna be like a civil war if you're gonna try to put through it, the water district out there.
Well, if I may, I talked with you on the bridge the other day when I was sampling, you stopped by, told me a little about yourself, and I had seen you talk before, but I've only been with your, here 5 years. I grew up on a farm on the Mississippi, so I share likeness for the river. But, and I'm actually filling out some paperwork right now for Bowser for looking for funding the next 2 or 3 years of some of their new program. And I sit there and I think, what are the main problems in the South Fork and the North Fork, both basins, and some things they share the same and some they don't. But DNR, I remember Rob Cleve, when I first met him, first thing he said to me, we just got too much water going through this system, no matter what you say. And, you know, it's city stormwater, it's farmers with tiling and, you know, this and that, but some of the same basic problems, I'm sure they've been for years, it's only getting worse, and we're only seeing it because of the increased rainage, and we're just not getting infiltration, and, you know, deer, I guess you guys been the big agency to say, you know, here is the problem, but unfortunately you guys can't do anything about it, but here's the problem. And the North Fork has a little more woods, but they got drainage issues too. We're seeing, I have about 10 projects alone. I've seen just this year, landowners coming in with their house falling in the river. It's because, yeah, they probably built 20 years ago, it was 100 yards, 200 yards away, now it's 2 feet away. Well, why does that happen? Well, the river, you know, it's natural, but we're just pushing too much water through that system, and it's everybody's fault. It's not just the farmer, it's not just this person on the lake, it's everybody, and we've done a lot of volunteer, the NRCS, you know, there's a lot of volunteer programs, but I think we're almost out of volunteers. We've gotten the farmers to do, we've done things, we'll do it, and the rest, you know, they're gonna keep doing it until they unfortunately die off, or that's just the way it goes. Things need to change, but changing human behavior is probably one of the toughest things in any profession, I think. Like I said, a couple years I've been here, I just talk with farmers, and I'm gonna do how I wanna do it. It's my property, and I respect that. It's their property, it's their livelihood. I wouldn't wanna take that away, just like I won't take it away from my father. But there's, like I said, level table is the best way to go about it, but I think we're past that volunteer part. It's almost, I know Wright County is gonna do probably a reassessment of all their ditches. McLeod County has done some work with their ditches, and that's the best way to do it. I have stuff redetermined. You get that 15-foot buffer on all the ditches. Freeborn County down south, so most counties have done it. It's taken them 10 years to fight people on who just won't let it happen. But there's 5 counties down south that have been just a shining example of how to do it in the state. Sibley County's doing a great job. It's probably what you guys are. It's starting to trickle north, but Wright County is going to start it next year, and it's going to be just a mess. It's going to cost millions of dollars. But that's how we're going to start doing it that way. I think that's what most counties are going to go through, because county ditches are a mess. They're old, they're falling apart, they're breaking. Then you go up the stream to private ditches, and they're all over, and people fighting, who's paying? I'm not paying for it. Why are you paying for it? You should be paying for it. You know, and that's something that the county board, I'm sure you guys deal with and just love it. And that's where the Watershed District, as far as Middle Fork and the North Fork and Buffalo Creek, they take some pressure off the county commissioners, because then they have to deal with that stuff. As much as they love it, I'm sure, it gets done, and it takes a little pressure off you guys, and sometimes it gets done a little better, because you guys don't have to worry about it as bad. So, just my little 2 cents. So.
I think Mr. Salinger will remember the day when every farmer had a herd of cattle, and a herd of cattle was pastures on the river. Do you know any now? I don't think from here to Cedar Mills there's one cow that's stepping in the Crow River anymore.
I don't know of any, even to the east right now.
That was supposed to be the answer. Get these cows away from the river, we're gonna have clean water. Well, we found out maybe the cows created some benefits.